Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's stay on with some more news that's coming in from the United States administration. But Donald Trump is reviving one of the most controversial policies of his presidency, a sweeping travel ban that's affecting over a dozen nations. Starting Monday, when the reciprocal tariffs also come into effect, citizens from 12 countries, including Iran, Somalia, Afghanistan and Libya, will be barred from entering the United States. Now, the new order also places stricter entry limits on visitors from other 7 countries. Trump says that the move is needed to protect national security. He cited a report on quote-unquote hostile attitudes towards America. But critics say that it echoes the 2017 quote-unquote Muslim ban, which triggered chaos and legal backlash in his first term. So that's as far as the latest from the Trump administration is concerned. But there is another news that's coming in. Well, Xi Jinping has asked for removal of negative measures on China. This, remember, after Donald Trump had a call with Xi Jinping of China. Remember this call. Trump has written on his social media platform as well that the call lasted approximately 1.5 hours and it resulted in a very positive conclusion for both the countries. There should be no longer questions that are respecting the complexity of rare earth products. He also said that our respective teams will be meeting shortly at a location yet to be determined. The conversation was focused almost entirely on trade, be given to understand from that post, and nothing was discussed concerning Russia or Ukraine. Now, the Chinese media first reported that United States President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping held talks over the phone. And in fact, the Chinese Foreign Affairs Ministry said that the call was initiated by Donald Trump. In fact, those are some of the details that we are getting. But let's take that story across to our guest tonight. Joining us now is Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, former Indian diplomat, and Jayant Dasgupta, former ambassador and representative of India at the WTO. Let me come to you first, Ambassador Trigunayat. Now, President Donald Trump has accelerated this travel ban implementation. But why, in your understanding, have these 12 countries featured in that proposed ban? And what is the common thread, and how large is the thread that Trump is speaking about?
Well, Sumita, at the outset, I would like to say that the visas or entry into a country is a sovereign decision of any country. For whatever reasons, if they feel threatened by certain countries, certain interests, they don't see that there are going to be enough checks and balances, that those countries are sending terrorists or they are required for geopolitical reasons. That's what, like Iran in this particular case, or Venezuela for that matter, the listed countries are there to put more pressure on them. The other countries also are problematic countries in their view. And Libya, as you know, that it was the United States which had bombed the place with NATO and now made it completely dysfunctional. And so obviously it's likewise in the Yemen also, we have seen the same thing. So most of these countries where they have put these kind of measures or our travel ban is essentially to cover up on their past mistakes. In certain cases, they want to put it, but you can't question it. It is his prerogative, and he'll continue to do so. As far as Muslim countries are concerned, if you remember, in his Trump 1.0, he had very clearly said he will put a blanket ban, but which was, of course, later on changed. But even today, while he was doing it, he had also once again said that if the material circumstances changes or compliances are improved, then they might consider changing these bans. So this will continue. I mean, this is something that Trump enjoys, whether it is travel ban, whether it is tariffs, or whether it is trade restrictions. So I think that we'll have to learn to live with Trump. He loves the T word, so it's good that this is how it's going to be. And the countries only have one option. You can reciprocate if you are capable of doing so. That's it.
Right, very rightly put, sir, that disruption is going to be the norm throughout this course of his presidency. But let me come to you, Mr. Dasgupta. Now, this move, as Donald Trump stated, it got expedited because of what happened in Colorado. But that suspect actually came from Egypt, which I think is not in the list. How do you read into that? And would banning nationals from these countries actually reduce threats, or these are simply shift tactics?
As Ambassador Trigunayat has mentioned, President Trump takes many decisions which are not really, strictly speaking, rational decisions. they are partly political and partly playing to the gallery. And, gallery meaning his MAGA base. So, these bans, I don't think they really speaking, apart from perhaps Iran and a few other countries, this 19 country ban is not justified. The But having said that, a country which allows visitors from other countries to come in has the right to either restrict their entry or to even ban their entry completely. So to that extent, President Trump is well within his rights, but the rationale behind his decision is not very clear at all. And of course, he has cited the case that many of the citizens of these countries on which the ban has been imposed, they stay on. And there is this Homeland Security report, which cites the cases, number of cases of citizens from these countries who have overstayed their visas and have then had to be deported. So he has some justification, but a complete ban, I think, is a bit too much.
Complete ban is actually a bit too much, and when you include so many of these countries, we'll have to see how these countries actually retaliate. But let me come to you, Mr. Trigunath. Are there any legal limitations of enforcement of a ban of this sort, given the fact that the U.S. government did face similar challenges in 2017 when a similar ban was proposed?
One thing is there that the USA has been a land of immigrants. So people, illegal, legal, all kinds of people have been going there in search of their dreams. But the dreams are getting shattered now. As you know, a large number of people we have seen going there. And similarly, very large places, America has used its unilateral, bombing of the places, interventions, causing displacement of large number of people. And eventually, they want to go where? Either to Europe or to America. Now that they don't want to take the responsibility. I remember when I was in New York, then the immigration chief was a friend of mine, and he told me, he said, anybody comes here and says I'm illegal, we let him go because keeping him in jail is far more expensive. So there are a large number of people who take recourse to, it's a very legalistic society. So what they do is they just go to a lawyer, and there are these immigration lawyers, and they continue to make it into a racket also. And in that process, you will see a very large number of people who are terrorists or a different kind of backgrounds with they create problems there. And now, even he has taken, there is Jewish lobby that has been working in it because of the so-called anti-Semitism which is happening in the universities and elsewhere. And also there are groups which are operating out of that. So there are radicalized groups and all. So this, what you saw, the killing in Colorado, has triggered it actually. So it is not that, and you will realize that from 9/11 onwards, we have not seen very many incidents happening there. Homeland Security has been pretty foolproof in that country. But what they do abroad is causing a problem for themselves or for the rest of the world. So interventionism by the United States has been a sole cause for a lot of instability across the world.
Right, sir. Right, sir. But the question really is whether the Trump administration really needs to look at intelligence when it comes to some of these, attacks or incidents that happen in the U.S. But let me shift tracks now to, of course, a phone call that happened between President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. The Chinese media outlet Xinhua reported, and it said that the call was initiated by Donald Trump, is something that the Beijing Ministry of Foreign Affairs also said in a subsequent statement. So, Ambassador Trigunath, is it a given then that Trump always chickens out?
No, he's not chickening out. What he's trying to do right now is, they both China and US believe in a G2 kind of an arrangement, and Ambassador Dasgupta will bear me out. The fact remains is that they want to have this kind of a world where two powerful people are there holding the reins. But this particular call, in my view, has essentially been in the context of Iran. He called yesterday President Putin of Russia. Today he spoke to President Xi Jinping, essentially trying to clinch the deal with the Iranians because that has a potential of flaring up the region. So I think that was one thing. So in that process, of course, there are bilateral issues among all these three major powers. And she also wants to take his kind of a piece of the cake. So he would have raised all the issues that is there because China has been uh, essentially been in the firing line of Trump for quite some time.
Right, sir. But when you talk about the talks on Russia, Ukraine, or Iran, according to the statement that's been released, it says that nothing was discussed concerning Russia, Ukraine, or Iran. And of course, the statement also says that there should be no longer any questions respecting the complexity of rare earth products. Our respective teams will be meeting shortly at a location to be determined. He said of that conversation in that social media post that was posted on his platform, that essentially is Truth Social. So, Ambassador Dasgupta, what follows after this now that both countries have decided to come on the table, although there are skirmishes that are still going on? Donald Trump yesterday stated that it's very difficult to negotiate with Xi Jinping. Where do you think this entire U.S.-India relationship is headed even after that 90-day relief period comes to an end?
There are several issues you have mentioned. The first thing is that President Trump has acknowledged that President Xi Jinping is a difficult customer to deal with. He should have known that. President Xi Jinping didn't come to power yesterday. He's been there even in the first term of President Trump. And already from 145%, the tariffs have come down to 30% for the US. And for China, they have reduced it also by 115% to, I think, 10%. So that is one thing. The second point is that just by this one gesture of banning the exports of rare earth magnets, the whole auto industry in the US, of course, Ford and General Motors are there, Tesla is also there, but there are a large number of other country manufacturers like Hyundai, like Toyota, etc. Now, all their production lines are likely to come to a grinding halt in a few weeks' time, if not days. And that is something which, and it will throw a large number of workers out of employment. So I'm sure President Trump would have raised this issue with the Chinese. And President Xi Jinping, knowing him by his reputation, would have played hardball. He would also have, had his demands up front. So President Trump, of course, is trying to save his face and get an honorable exit from the game that he has himself started. And I wouldn't be surprised if the tariffs come down further and there is a grand statement, in a week or 2 weeks' time about differences having been sorted out, etc. If you remember, even in the first stint, when China had promised to buy about $200 billion worth of products from the US to reduce the trade deficit, it didn't keep to its word. And this time around also, it may not. So therein lies the problem that President Trump has brought upon himself. As far as India is concerned, the Court of International Trade had ruled that the tariffs, barring the tariffs on steel and aluminium, which had been imposed under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act 1962 of the US, barring those tariffs, the other tariffs which had been imposed under the IEEA, those were not in order. And for them, President Trump had overstepped his authority. Now that appeal is pending before the Federal Court, Circuit Court of Appeals. And the court has given a stay to the lower court's orders. So that's all right. But before that decision comes through and then the Supreme Court rules on it, I think it would not be very prudent for any country to go in and have a trade deal with the US.
Absolutely. In India, Ambassador Das Gupta has raised that issue at WTO as well, like you rightly mentioned about steel and aluminum tariffs. And this, we're given to understand from sources that this is also being discussed even as a trade team from the United States is currently visiting India. They're going to be here tomorrow as well. But Ambassador Trigunayat, now when we talk about, Donald Trump blinking first when it comes to his dealings with China, will this push him to change his approach when he's dealing with other countries as well, given the fact that, too much isolationism eventually, like Ambassador Dasgupta was also stating, that it's hurting American interests itself. For example, the auto industry has been impacted, and then, of course, the rare earth materials issue that's also impacting the auto and several other industries.
It depends on which power you are dealing with or which country you are dealing with. So if Trump is dealing with some countries that buckle under, he'll try to pressure them even more. But he always starts from the maximalist position. And thinks he's a deal maker. So in the deal making, you always give some, take some at the end. But being a most powerful country in the world, obviously he does. But China is also a hard nut to crack and a strong economy, a country which does not blink first. We have seen it on many occasions. And so therefore he has come down on his own, and he realizes that the steps that he has taken are also impacting his country. So the MAGA or whatever it is, at the end of the day, you have to have a sane kind of a foreign policy and the trade policy that is going to work out. So that's why he is happy that large number of countries are working with them to come about some kind of a trade deals with each country and try to get the best thing. 10% that he has said, he'll continue to get that from every country irrespective. We have seen what happened with the Europeans. That's what he has done. India is also discussing, and I think we are going to finalize. But we are having a problem also, the same kind of thing, rare earths, as far as China is concerned. Our own auto industry is also facing, and I believe that we have also called for consultations. So China today has become an important node in the global value and supply chains. It will be a long time before that can be addressed or alternate supply chains will be created. So until then, most of the times we are going to see some adjustments in the bilateral relations and multilateral relations. You mentioned about WTO. I think the WTO is defunct because of United States, and Ambassador Dasgupta was ambassador there, and since then until today, it is just a name. And most of the multilateral institutions are dysfunctional.
Right, sir. Let me talk to you, Mr. Dasgupta, specifically about India's negotiations with the United States as far as those are concerned. Of course, Ambassador Trigunayat was stating that, it's going to be different for different countries in how Donald Trump deals with them. But what do you anticipate could be the concessions that could be given by the United States? And, what is it that the Indian side is going to ask for?
As far as the concessions from the US is concerned, there would be none. There would only be promises, because the US administration at the moment does not have a fast track authority or congressional authority to lower tariffs. So they can't lower tariffs. They can only raise tariffs. They can keep them static. So there can't be any concessions from the US. So it is not going to be a bilateral trade agreement. It is going to be a unilateral trade agreement in which the expectation of the Trump administration is that the other side would keel over and give concessions. So that is one thing. The second point is that there are about 12,000 tariff lines at the 8-digit level, which define the goods universe. Now, out of those 12,000 tariff lines, the US doesn't export in most of them and is not globally competitive in most of them. Even China is not globally competitive in all 12,000 tariff lines. So if India, hypothetically, were to give concessions on tariff lines in which the US doesn't have a global presence, is not competitive, it would be a cosmetic exercise which could satisfy the Trump administration, but it would not really mean very much in concrete terms. The third point is that India has some defensive interests in agriculture, especially dairy products. And cereals like corn and soya. So in those, and there is another related aspect of GM food. So in these areas, I think India will stick to its guns and will not give concessions which go against its national interest and its professed policies.
Absolutely, Ambassador. In fact, Howard Lutnick, the U.S. Commerce Secretary, also stated just 2 days back that you should expect a deal between the United States and India in the not-too-distant future. And then Piyush Goyal, the Union Commerce Minister, also stated that both countries desire to give preferential access to each other's businesses, and we are working towards that bilateral trade agreement. So preferential access is one area which both the countries are looking at, more so the United States. Ambassador Trigunayat, would you agree with Ambassador Dasgupta said that this is largely going to be a unilateral deal, given the fact that we've heard again and again from the government that India is only looking at a mutually beneficial bilateral trade agreement and a mutually beneficial deal, even if it's for the interim period?
Well, I think until it is done, it is not done. I mean, that is what Ambassador Dasgupta is also trying to say. So we'll know only exactly what kind of a deal we are going to achieve. Only Mr. Piyush Goyal is currently privy to it, whatever he has gathered while he was in Washington, D.C., and he's been talking. But you know what it has done is the Trump's approach essentially has given us a different leeway. The other countries like the India-UK FTA got signed up very quickly. Now the Europeans are also rushing into it quite fast, and other countries are also. So you are gaining elsewhere some kind of a market access and getting more concessions elsewhere. As I understand, with the US, we had also offered on various items 0%, 0 to 0, or something like that. Or he calls India a tariff king. So obviously he expects far more, and he thinks that America is being wronged by countries who are exporting to their country. He does not think that the services exports count at all, where they have a leeway. So I think that gradually, by discussions, and hopefully Howard Lutnick, who's currently to me seems to be a very, very uh, I wouldn't put a word arrogant, but stating exactly what President Trump wants to communicate. And so, but hopefully, as they say, that there will be a deal in not too distant a future. And let's keep the fingers crossed what kind of a deal we are going to have.
Absolutely, sir. And that remains to be seen, the kind of deal that's going to be chalked out between both the sides. And we are yet to understand and yet to learn on how many more rounds are there going to be before that reciprocal window, that relief window on reciprocal tariffs when they get reimposed, that gets over. Well, with that, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on India Tonight and sharing your thoughts and perspectives on this big story.